Good morning. This is the Kusnak practice. We are reinventing the experience of care. I'm Philippe Robert. I'm here today with Melissa Nobile for our next set of questions that we are discussing the sleep deprivation and its effect on mental health. So according to a recent survey from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, AASM, 85% of the US adults don't get the recommended 7 hours or more sleep every night. The British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher is famously said to have only slept 4 hours each night. So why 7 hours, and how important is it for individuals to get this amount of sleep? And how much does this vary from person to person?
Well, first of all, we can talk about sleep in general. And sleeping, it's an innate behavior. It's genetically programmed and anchored that all animals need sleep. And then there's going to be individual differences, cultural differences, political, economical factors, not differences, sorry, that are going to come and influence people's habit of sleeping. So you have giraffes, they sleep 2 hours a night, and then we have cats or lions, they're going to sleep 20 hours a day. And humans, we're kind of in the middle average of the animal range, around 8.2 hours in average. That's what has been observed usually. And there's a lot of different theories as to why we need sleep, which might be for later. And then this average of 8.2 hours of sleep, so it's going to vary between individuals, but it's also going to vary within individuals in the course of their lifetime. So, for example, newborns, babies, when you're a baby, the brain is not completely developed like adult form. So we know that the sleep cycles, the REM and NREM, they don't exist yet, which is why babies, they wake up in the night. It's quite disruptive, difficult to predict, etc. But they're still going to sleep quite a lot. It won't be an 8-hour 0.2 average. It's going to be maybe a lot more than that. And then kids, they stop to get into a night and day schedule of sleep and to follow what the society has created as the sleep pattern that we want for them. So daytime awake, nighttime sleeping. And then when you become a teenager, it's the phase where the brain is going to change again so much through the process of at that age in sleep. Synapses are going to change, meaning that information they've learned that is valuable is going to be reinforced during sleep, and information that they don't need, or synapses in the brain that they don't need, are going to start to disappear. And all this happens during sleep. So teenagers are going to start to sleep quite a lot again. And for biological reasons too, they're going to go to bed later. So usually we see a 2 hours delay compared to when they were kids. And it's quite interesting if you already start thinking, because at the Kusnak practice we treat mental health, we see that in teenagers, they're kind of constantly in this social jet lag because they still have to wake up at 8 a.m. to go to school, even though the brain is in reconstruction and technically they'd need more sleep, and sleep that's following a different schedule. And then when you're an adult, you're going to get into a sleep routine that's usually stable until you become a senior. And then at that age, we observe again that sleep becomes fragmented, less deep, and that people sleep less. We don't really know why. The most likely hypothesis is that it's due to medication intake that's quite common at that age. So how we sleep varies within a person in the course of the lifetime. If we think of this 7 hour that you gave, or the 8.2 average that I gave, and then it's going to vary from one individual to another, where we each have a different baseline around this 8.2 hours. And that's, humans are all different. If you think of, some humans have blue eyes, some have green eyes. Some women have a 21-day menstruating cycle, others are 35 days, and it's going to be the same with sleep. There's going to be some variability there. And I forgot to answer the last question. And yes, sleep is important, indispensable. Actually, it's a vital need for a lot of different reasons.
Very good. In the same survey, slightly more than 1/3, actually 34% of Americans say that they sleep for 7 or more hours, only 2 nights or fewer each week. In line with these findings from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, And regularly sleeping less than 7 hours per day associated with an increased risk of developing chronic conditions such as obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease and strokes, in addition to mental health problem. It does. So this demonstrates how important the sleep is for both physical and mental health.
Yes, absolutely. When someone is diverting away from what their own baseline is, again, usually averages 8.2 hours. What's interesting is that we see a huge difference between the impact it has on them objectively that we can measure and that has been observed in labs, and what they report subjectively. So first of all, if it happens for a few nights where someone's not sleeping so well, humans have resources, so they'll manage to compensate. But if it becomes more chronic, over time, it's going to have problems on lots of different, both psychological and physical factors. So they might start having difficulty with concentration, emotion regulation, memory, creativity, problem solving, lots of other factors actually. But subjectively, they're going to have a tendency to think that they can still perform at the same level. There's been some studies on that were done. One I can think of was with individuals that were deprived of different amounts of sleep in a night. So maybe it was 8 hours of sleep, then 4, then 2, etc. I don't know the exact numbers. And then the next day they had to drive a car, and they measured the reaction time it took them to react to a sudden need to brake to stop the car. And they realized that everybody when they had to evaluate their performance, they all said they did amazing. They were fine, they were awake, all good, regardless of how much they slept. But objectively, we saw very, very important differences in the reaction time. So there is this objective versus subjective component. And then physically, we also know that once someone can no longer compensate after the first few days or weeks, etc., the lack of sleep, we're going to see impacts on cardiovascular diseases risk increase. We're going to see impacts on the brain, hormonal regulation, and a lot of different factors.
The pandemic has also had a negative effect on global sleeping patterns, hasn't it? With added stresses and worries. With a change in daily routines, the COVID-19 pandemic is also disrupting sleeps for Americans. And according to the AASM survey, 1 in 5 Americans, actually 22%, are sleeping worse due to the pandemic, and 19% are getting less sleep. Are these factors, and is there any tip that you can give to those struggling? What kind of changes can one make, for instance, in their sleeping environment? What could they do to help? And have you seen an increase in cases of sleep deprivation yourself since the pandemic began?
So yes, there's been an increase since the pandemic began, at least observed in clinics, etc. And it's not easy to give tips onto exactly what someone can do, because it depends on the factors that belong to their own life journey. But most people who struggle with insomnia report it's not somatic reasons that are keeping them asleep, but that it's an overall cognitive activation that they just cannot stop. So they're going to have intrusive thoughts or images that keep them awake at night. So in terms of sleep environment, because that was your question, one thing people can do is to, and it might sound really simple, but it's to keep their space, their home, and specifically the bedroom, really clean and tidy, and maybe go through a process of decluttering the house. Because what we realize is in the process of going through their own personal belongings, they're also, and cleaning and clearing, it's also going to clear the mind. And sometimes I have seen this work for some people. And then it doesn't exactly answer what people can do on their sleep environment, but in general, if they're struggling, yoga in the evening, meditation, relaxation techniques is going to be linked to sleeping problems and can help them just relax. Cultivating gratitude, so thinking of 3 things positive that happened in the day. We know that positive emotions are going to facilitate sleeping, falling asleep. avoiding stimulants at night, alcohol, nicotine, avoiding eating too much before bed time. And then if those things are not working, what we usually do in a therapeutic process is going to try to find out other underlying factors, such as maybe the person has an impulsive temperament, and we know that people who are more impulsive are more likely in the evening to have counterfactual emotions of regret, because they've acted impulsively throughout the day and maybe said things they didn't really want to say, etc. And it's in the nighttime that emotions about this are going to resurface. Or seniors, we see in the evening is when regrets are going to also resurface. I should have maybe done this in my life. I wish I had done that, etc. And then we'll also work in therapy, for example, we'll explore if the person is using the bedroom for something other than sleep. And if that's the case, we'll stop that immediately, because through the process of cognitive association, we call in therapy, the brain is going to identify the bedroom and the bed with purely sleep if we don't do any activities in there. And that's going to help fall asleep too. And lots of other things we can work on.
Then the last question, Melissa, today is how important is exercise in ensuring that one has a good night's sleep with a minimal deprivation in your opinion?
Sport can be a factor that helps falling asleep. However, it shouldn't be done if someone is struggling with sleep in the usually 3 hours before going to bed. So sport, helpful, it can tire you out, it can be part of a good routine. However, not right before bedtime, it will probably have the opposite effect.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. Today, we had the pleasure of having Melissa with us. Melissa Nobile is our psychologist here at the Kusnak practice. And we have been talking today about deprivation of sleep and the effect on mental health. Thank you very much, Melissa.